The wind howled across the Montana prairie, a relentless force that bent the brittle grass and stirred clouds of dust into the air. The horizon stretched endlessly, a canvas of gold and gray where the late afternoon sun fought against the bruised edge of an approaching storm. Sagebrush clung to the earth, its sharp, earthy scent mingling with the faint tang of ozone. In the distance, a low rumble of thunder rolled like a warning drum. Amid this vast, untamed wilderness stood a lone figure, Dr. Lena Whitefeather, a Blackfeet wildlife biologist whose boots crunched against the dry earth as she scanned the landscape through binoculars. Lena was no stranger to this rugged expanse of the Great Plains. Her family had walked these lands for generations, their stories woven with the buffalo that once blanketed the prairies. At 38, she carried a quiet authority earned through a decade of studying wildlife behavior, her sharp eyes and steady hands as much a part of her as the braid that fell down her back. Her pickup truck, parked a half-mile back, held her field kit, tranquilizers, bandages, and a notebook filled with observations on the local buffalo herd. She'd been called out here by a rancher's tip, a wounded animal, possibly a buffalo, spotted near the canyon's edge. The air grew heavy as Lena crested a low rise, her breath catching at the site below. There, in a shallow dip of the prairie, stood a massive buffalo bull. He was a colossus, nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, his 2,000-pound frame a monument of muscle and bone. His woolly coat, a deep chestnut matted with dust and streaked with dark, wet patches, glistened faintly in the fading light. Curved horns swept back from his broad head, and his eyes, deep, liquid pools of resolve, locked onto something hidden in the grass at his feet. He stood motionless, save for the slow, labored rise and fall of his flanks, each breath a low, rasping huff that carried across the open ground. Lena lowered her binoculars, her pulse quickening. The buffalo was injured, badly. Blood seeped from a deep gash across his shoulder, staining his coat and pooling in the dirt. Another wound, jagged and raw, marred his hindquarter. Yet he didn't flee, didn't charge, didn't even shift his weight. He stood like a sentinel, his massive head lowered protectively over the ground. This wasn't normal. Buffalo were wary creatures, quick to bolt from humans or danger. But this one, he was guarding something. "Easy, big fella," Lena murmured, her voice soft as she took a cautious step forward. The wind swallowed her words, but the buffalo's ears twitched, flicking toward her. His gaze shifted, meeting hers for a fleeting moment, and she froze. There was something in those eyes. Not fear, not aggression, but a spark of intent, almost pleading. It sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of awe and unease. She crouched low, scanning the ground around the buffalo. The grass was trampled, streaked with more blood. Not all of it his. Tire tracks, faint but fresh, cut through the dirt a dozen yards away, leading toward the canyon's edge. Poachers. The word hit her like a stone. Illegal hunting had plagued these lands for years, despite protections. Lena's jaw tightened. She'd seen the aftermath before, slaughtered buffalo, their hides and horns taken, their bodies left to rot. But this bull was alive, standing his ground despite the pain that must be coursing through him. "Lena, you seein' this?" A voice called from behind. She turned to see Tom Carver, a local rancher who'd tipped her off, trudging up the rise. His weathered face, framed by a graying beard, was taut with concern. He carried a rifle, slung loosely over his shoulder, more for protection than intent. "Never seen a buffalo act like that. Looks like he's ready to take on the world." "He's hurt bad," Lena said, her voice steady but urgent. "And he's not moving. Something's keeping him here." Tom squinted, his eyes tracing the buffalo's stance. "You think it's a calf? Herd's been through here, saw tracks yesterday." Lena shook her head. "Maybe, but this feels different." She edged closer, keeping her movements slow, deliberate. The buffalo's head dipped lower, a deep, guttural bellow rumbling from his chest, not a threat, but a warning. Her heart pounded, but she held her ground, her training kicking in. She studied his posture, the way his massive hooves pressed into the earth, the way his tail flicked with agitation. Then she saw it, a faint movement in the grass beneath him, a shadow that didn't belong. "Tom, get the kit from the truck," she said, her voice low but firm. And call the sheriff. We've got poacher tracks. Tom hesitated, his eyes flicking to the buffalo. You sure you wanna get closer? That thing could flatten you. I'll be fine, Lena said, though her stomach twisted. She'd faced down angry bears and spooked elk, but this buffalo was different. His stillness, his focus, it was almost human. As Tom jogged back to the truck, Lena took another step, her boots sinking into the soft earth. The buffalo's breathing grew louder, a heavy, wet sound that spoke of pain and exhaustion. She could smell the sharp, coppery tang of blood now, mixed with the musky warmth of his coat. Up close, his size was staggering, his shoulders broad as a doorway, his horns glinting like polished obsidian. But it was his eyes that held her, dark and unyielding, as if he were daring her to understand. What are you protecting? She whispered, more to herself than to him. She crouched again, peering into the grass. The wind shifted, carrying a faint, unexpected sound, a soft, trembling whimper. Human. Her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. She edged closer, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. The buffalo snorted, his massive head swinging toward her, but he didn't charge. Instead, he shifted slightly, revealing a small, huddled shape in the grass. A child, no more than 3 years old, curled into a ball, her clothes torn and streaked with dirt. A faint sob escaped her lips, barely audible over the wind. Lena's heart stopped. A child, out here, alone in the wilderness, guarded by a wounded buffalo. Her mind raced, piecing together the impossible. The tire tracks, the blood, the poachers, had they left her here? Abandoned her? Or had something else happened, something that drove this buffalo to stand sentinel over a human child? Hold on, little one, Lena said, her voice trembling with urgency. She looked back at the buffalo, meeting his gaze again. You're one hell of a guardian, aren't you? The bull huffed, his breath a warm cloud in the cooling air, and for a moment, she swore he understood her. The storm clouds loomed closer, lightning flickering on the horizon. Time was running out, for the child, for the buffalo, for whatever truth lay hidden in this windswept prairie. Lena took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had to act, had to earn this buffalo's trust before it was too late. But as she reached for her radio to call for help, a faint glint in the grass caught her eye, a small metallic object, half buried near the child. A locket, its chain broken, gleaming faintly in the dying light. It was a clue, a piece of the puzzle, but to what? The buffalo's low bellow echoed again, urgent and deep, as if he knew the storm was coming. Lena's pulse raced. Whatever this buffalo was protecting, it was more than just a child. It was a story, a mystery, a bond forged in blood and resilience. And she was about to step into its heart. The prairie seemed to hold its breath as Lena Whitefeather crouched near the wounded buffalo, her eyes darting between the massive animal and the small, trembling child curled in the grass. The wind whipped harder now, carrying the sharp scent of rain and the distant growl of thunder. The buffalo, a towering sentinel of fur and muscle, stood resolute, his blood-streaked shoulder glistening in the dimming light. His deep, labored breaths filled the air, each huff a testament to his pain and determination. Lena's heart pounded, her mind racing to make sense of the impossible scene. A 2,000-pound buffalo bull guarding a human child, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that felt almost communicative. "Easy, big guy," Lena whispered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She kept her hands raised, palms open, signaling peace. The buffalo's ears flicked, and his massive head dipped slightly, as if acknowledging her presence. His wounds, a deep gash across his shoulder and a jagged tear on his hindquarter, oozed steadily, matting his chestnut coat with dark, sticky blood. Yet he didn't waver, his hooves planted firmly over the child, who let out another faint whimper. Lena's radio crackled. "Lena, sheriff's on the way." Tom Carver's voice came through, breathless from his sprint to the truck. "Got a vet comin', too, Dr. Maria Santos. ETA 20 minutes. You okay out there?" "For now," Lena replied, her eyes never leaving the buffalo. "Hurry, Tom. We've got a kid here." "A kid?" Tom's voice spiked with disbelief. "Out there? How the hell?" I don't know yet, Lena cut in. Just get them here. She clipped the radio to her belt and inched closer, her boots crunching softly on the dry grass. The buffalo snorted, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her chest, but he didn't move. His eyes, deep and unyielding, seemed to weigh her intentions. She'd spent years studying buffalo behavior, decoding their subtle cues, the flick of a tail, the angle of a head, but this was different. This bull wasn't just protecting territory or a herd. He was protecting her, the child, with a purpose that defied everything Lena knew about wild animals. She studied the girl, barely visible in the tall grass. She was small, maybe 3 years old, her dark hair tangled with burrs, her clothes, a faded pink jacket and muddy jeans, torn and streaked with dirt. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her tiny body shivering despite the warmth of the buffalo's shadow. Lena's throat tightened. How long had she been out here? And why was this buffalo, wounded and bleeding, standing guard like a soldier? The tire tracks she'd spotted earlier gnawed at her. Poachers. The signs were unmistakable. The churned earth, the faint glint of a spent rifle casing half buried in the dirt a few yards away. She'd seen their handiwork before, buffalo shot for their horns or hides, left to bleed out in the prairie. But this bull had survived, and somehow, he'd found this child. Or had she found him? Lena's gaze shifted to the locket she'd glimpsed earlier, its broken chain glinting faintly near the child's hand. She wanted to reach for it, to see if it held a clue, but the buffalo's low bellow stopped her. His head lowered further, his curved horns catching the last rays of sunlight, a warning not to come closer. "All right," she murmured, easing back. "I hear you." Footsteps crunched behind her, and she turned to see Tom returning, a medical kit slung over his shoulder. His face was flushed, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. "Jesus, Lena, you weren't kiddin'. A kid. Out here." "Yeah," Lena said, her voice tight. "We need to move carefully. He's protecting her, and he's not gonna let us near her unless we earn his trust." Tom scratched his beard, glancing at the buffalo. "Earn his trust? That thing's half dead and still looks like he could run us into the ground." "He's not just an animal right now," Lena said, her tone sharp. "He's acting like he knows what's at stake. Look at him, he's not charging, not running. He's waiting." Tom shook his head, muttering under his breath, but he set the kit down and stayed back. Lena's mind churned. She needed to assess the child's condition, but the buffalo's wounds were critical too. Blood dripped steadily from his shoulder, pooling in the dirt, and his breathing was growing shallower. If he collapsed, he could crush the child, or worse, turn aggressive in his pain. She scanned the surroundings, her biologist's instincts kicking in. The tire tracks led toward the canyon's edge, where the terrain dropped into a maze of rocky gullies. Nearby, she spotted more signs of struggle: broken sagebrush, a smear of blood on a rock, and what looked like a torn piece of fabric caught on a thorn. Her stomach twisted. Poachers didn't just shoot and leave, they hunted with purpose. Had they been chasing the buffalo? Or something, someone else? "Lena, you hear that?" Tom said suddenly, his head tilting toward the canyon. A faint, high-pitched sound carried on the wind, not human, not mechanical, but animal. A soft, plaintive bleat. Lena's breath caught. A calf? Was the buffalo guarding more than just the child? She edged to the side, keeping her movements slow, and peered toward the sound. The buffalo's head swung to follow her, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't move. In the distance, near the canyon's rim, she saw a faint shape, a smaller buffalo, a calf, its leg caught in a tangle of wire and rock. It thrashed weakly, its cries barely audible over the wind. "Oh no," Lena whispered. The pieces were starting to fit. The buffalo hadn't just stumbled across the child, he was protecting his own, too. But the child, how did she fit into this? The locket, the tire tracks, the poachers, it all pointed to a human story tangled with the buffalo's own desperate stand. "Tom, there's a calf out there, trapped," she said, her voice urgent. "We need to free it, but we can't leave the kid. And this bull, he's not gonna let us near either of them unless we're smart about it." Tom frowned, glancing at the storm clouds rolling closer. "Sheriff and the vet'll be here soon. What's the play?" Lena studied the buffalo, her mind racing. His wounds were severe, but his resolve was stronger. She'd seen buffalo fight through pain before, driven by instinct to protect their herd, but this was different. This bull was holding his ground for a human child, too, as if he understood her vulnerability. It was behavior she'd never witnessed, never even read about. Buffalo were intelligent, yes, but this was something else. Compassion, maybe. Or something deeper. She took a cautious step forward, her voice soft but clear. "I'm gonna help you," she said to the buffalo, feeling a little foolish but trusting her gut. "Your calf, the kid, we're gonna get them safe. But you gotta let me in." The buffalo's ears twitched again, and for a moment, his head lifted slightly, as if considering her words. Then he let out a soft, rumbling vocalization, not a bellow, but something quieter, almost mournful. It sent a chill through her. She'd heard buffalo vocalize before, but this was different, like a plea carried on the wind. Lena gestured to Tom. "Get the wire cutters from the kit. We'll deal with the calf first, it might calm him down. But move slow. He's watching." Tom nodded, his face pale, and began unpacking the kit. Lena turned back to the buffalo, her eyes locking with his. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" she said softly. "You took on Poachers, didn't you? For her. For your calf." The child whimpered again, stirring in the grass, and the buffalo's head dipped lower, his massive snout brushing the ground near her. Lena's breath caught. He was checking on her, his movements gentle despite his size and pain. Her chest ached with a mix of awe and urgency. This buffalo wasn't just surviving, he was sacrificing. The sound of an approaching vehicle broke her focus. Headlights flashed in the distance, cutting through the gathering dusk. The sheriff and the vet were almost here, but the storm was closing in faster, and the buffalo's strength was fading. Lena glanced at the locket again, its faint gleam a nagging question. Who was this child? Why had Poachers been here? And why was this buffalo risking everything to protect her? As the first raindrops began to fall, Lena made a decision. She would approach the child, buffalo or no buffalo. She had to know what, or who, this bull was guarding with his life. The truth was close, hidden in the grass and the blood and the storm, and she was determined to uncover it before it was too late. The Montana prairie trembled under the weight of an approaching storm, the sky a churning mass of iron-gray clouds split by jagged streaks of lightning. Rain fell in sharp, stinging drops, slicking the grass and turning the dirt to mud beneath Lena Whitefeather's boots. The wounded buffalo bull stood resolute, his massive frame a dark silhouette against the flashing sky, his blood-streaked coat glistening with wet. His deep, rasping breaths cut through the wind, each one a testament to the pain he endured as he guarded the trembling child curled at his hooves. Nearby, the faint bleats of a trapped buffalo calf echoed from the canyon's edge, sharp and desperate. Lena's heart hammered, her pulse a drumbeat matching the storm's rhythm. Time was slipping away. "Lena, they're here!" Tom Carver shouted, his voice barely audible over the wind. Headlights pierced the dusk as a sheriff's SUV and a veterinary truck skidded to a stop 100 yards away. Doors slammed, and two figures emerged. Sheriff Dan Holt, a broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense stride, and Dr. Maria Santos, a wildlife veterinarian clutching a medical bag. They hurried toward the scene, their faces tightening as they took in the buffalo, the child, and the distant calf. "Dr. Whitefeather, what the hell's going on?" Sheriff Holt called, his hand resting on his holster as he eyed the buffalo. "You said a kid's out here?" "Under him," Lena said, pointing to the buffalo's massive form. "And there's a calf trapped over there by the canyon. Poacher tracks everywhere. We need to move fast, his wounds are bad, and the kid's not in great shape either." Maria, her dark hair plastered to her face by the rain, crouched beside Lena, her eyes scanning the buffalo. "Those gashes look like rifle wounds," she said, her voice tight. "He's lost a lot of blood. I can sedate him, but if he's protecting that kid, he might not take kindly to it." "He won't," Lena said, her voice firm. "He's not just protecting her, He's choosing to. I've never seen a buffalo act like this. We need to work with him, not against him. Holt frowned, rain dripping from his hat. Work with him. Lena, that's a ton of angry animal. We need to get that kid out now. He's not angry, Lena snapped, her eyes locked on the buffaloes. His gaze met hers, dark and unyielding, but there was something else there. Trust, maybe, or a plea. His massive head dipped slightly, his curved horns glinting as lightning flashed. A soft, rumbling vocalization escaped him, not a threat but a signal, as if he were saying, hurry. Lena took a deep breath, the rain cold against her skin, the scent of wet sagebrush and blood thick in the air. Maria, get ready to treat his wounds, but hold off on the sedative. Tom, you and Holt grab the wire cutters and head to the calf. I'm going for the kid. You sure? Tom asked, his face pale. If he charges. He won't, Lena said, though her stomach twisted with doubt. She'd studied buffalo for years, knew their strength, their unpredictability. This bull could crush her in an instant, wounded or not. But those eyes, that steady, almost human resolve, they told her he understood the stakes. She stepped forward, her boots sinking into the mud, her hands raised. Hey, big fella, she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm's roar. I'm gonna help her. You know that, don't you? The buffalo's ears flicked, and he shifted slightly, his massive hooves crunching the wet grass. His breathing was labored, each huff a cloud of steam in the cold rain, but he didn't move away. Lena crouched, her eyes darting to the child. The girl was still curled tight, her small body shivering, her sobs quieter now, almost drowned by the wind. The locket Lena had spotted earlier gleamed faintly near her hand, its broken chain tangled in the grass. Lena's fingers itched to grab it, but she focused on the girl. Hey, sweetheart, she said gently. I'm Lena. I'm here to help you. The buffalo snorted, his head lowering further, his snout brushing the ground near the child. For a heart-stopping moment, Lena thought he might charge, but instead, he let out another low rumble, almost encouraging. Her breath caught. Was he helping her? She inched closer, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The buffalo's massive shoulder loomed above her, his warmth radiating despite the rain. She reached out, her hand trembling, and gently touched the girl's arm. The child flinched but didn't pull away. It's okay, Lena whispered. You're safe now. The buffalo shifted again, his hooves sinking deeper into the mud, and for a moment, he leaned slightly toward Lena, his massive head nudging the air near her shoulder. It wasn't a threat, it was permission. Tears stung Lena's eyes, mixing with the rain. This animal, bleeding and battered, was trusting her with what he'd fought to protect. Maria, now. Lena called, keeping her voice calm. Maria moved in, her medical bag open, her hands steady as she began assessing the buffalo's wounds. Deep lacerations, possible infection, she muttered. I can clean and stitch, but he needs a full workup soon. Lena carefully lifted the child, her small body limp but warm. The girl's eyes fluttered open, wide and terrified, locking onto the buffalo. Big cow, she mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Lena said, her voice thick with emotion. He's a hero, isn't he? She cradled the girl, shielding her from the rain, and backed away slowly. The buffalo watched, his eyes softening, his massive frame sagging slightly as if relieved. But his gaze flicked toward the canyon, where the calves' bleats grew weaker. Tom, Holt, go. Lena shouted. The two men sprinted toward the canyon, wire cutters in hand, their boots slipping in the mud. Lena carried the child to the veterinary truck, laying her on a blanket in the back. Maria followed, splitting her attention between the girl and the buffalo. She's dehydrated, maybe hypothermic, Maria said, checking the child's pulse. We need to get her to a hospital. Lena nodded, her eyes drawn back to the buffalo. He stood taller now, his head raised, as if sensing the child was safe. But his wounds were still bleeding, his strength fading. Maria worked quickly, cleaning the gashes and applying temporary bandages, but the buffalo's focus remained on the canyon. Lena followed his gaze, her heart sinking. The calf. She grabbed her flashlight and ran toward the canyon, the storm's roar drowning out everything but the calves' faint cries. Tom and Holt were already there, wrestling with a tangle of barbed wire wrapped around the calf's leg. The young buffalo thrashed weakly, its small body slick with mud and blood. "It's bad," Holt grunted, cutting through the wire. "Poachers must have set this as a trap." Lena glanced back at the bull. He'd moved closer, his massive form looming through the rain, his eyes fixed on the calf. He let out a deep, resonant bellow that echoed through the canyon, a sound that seemed to carry both pain and hope. The calf responded, its cries growing stronger, as if drawing strength from its protector. "Got it!" Tom shouted as the last wire snapped free. The calf struggled to its feet, wobbling but alive. The bull bellowed again, softer this time, and took a shaky step forward. Lena's chest ached with awe. He'd fought off poachers, guarded a child, and now he was calling to his calf, his strength defying his injuries. As Holt and Tom guided the calf back toward the prairie, Lena returned to the bull. He stood still, his breathing slower now, his eyes meeting hers again. She reached out, her hand hovering near his massive shoulder, and to her shock, he didn't pull away. Her fingers brushed his wet, matted coat, warm and coarse, and for a moment, the storm seemed to fade. It was just her and this buffalo, bound by a trust she couldn't explain. "We've got you," she whispered. "You did it." Maria approached, her face grim. "He's stable for now, but he needs surgery. And that kid, she needs a doctor fast. Sheriff's calling for a chopper." Lena nodded, her eyes still on the buffalo. The child was safe, the calf was free, but questions burned in her mind. Who was this girl? Why had poachers been here? And that locket, what story did it hold? As the rain pounded down and the helicopter's distant thrum grew louder, Lena knew this was only the beginning. The buffalo's courage had saved lives today, but the truth behind this moment was still hidden, waiting to be uncovered. The storm had passed, leaving the Montana prairie cloaked in a damp, golden haze as the sun broke through the clouds. The air carried the clean scent of rain-soaked earth, mingling with the musky warmth of sagebrush and the faint tang of antiseptic from Dr. Maria Santos's veterinary kit. Lena Whitefeather stood beside a temporary enclosure, her boots caked with mud, her eyes fixed on the massive buffalo bull now resting on a bed of straw. His chestnut coat, once matted with blood and dust, had been cleaned and stitched, though the deep gashes on his shoulder and hindquarter still bore the raw marks of his battle with poachers. His breathing was steadier now, a slow, rhythmic huff that spoke of resilience, and his dark eyes, though weary, held a spark of the same fierce determination Lena had seen the day before. The child, a girl named Ellie, was safe in a hospital in Billings, her condition stable but her story still a mystery. The buffalo calf, freed from the barbed wire, rested in a smaller pen nearby, its soft bleats a quiet counterpoint to the bull's deep breaths. Lena's heart ached with a mix of relief and curiosity. The buffalo, whom she'd started calling Thunderheart, a name that felt right for his unyielding spirit, had saved Ellie and his calf, but the why and how of it all gnawed at her. "Lena, you've been out here all night," Maria said, approaching with a thermos of coffee. Her dark hair was pulled back, her face etched with exhaustion but softened by awe. "He's doing better than I expected. Those wounds were bad, but he's tough. We'll move him to the sanctuary tomorrow for full recovery." Lena nodded, her fingers brushing the enclosure's fence. "He's more than tough. He knew what he was doing, Maria. Standing over that girl, guarding his calf, he wasn't just acting on instinct. There's something deeper." Maria raised an eyebrow, handing Lena a cup of coffee. "You're starting to sound like you think he's got a soul." "Maybe he does," Lena said, her voice quiet but firm. She took a sip, the warmth grounding her. "I've studied buffalo my whole life. They're smart, sure, but this is something else." The enclosure was set up near the canyon's edge, a temporary haven rigged by the local wildlife sanctuary team who'd arrived at dawn. Thunderheart lay still, his massive head resting on the straw, but his eyes followed Lena's every move. When she spoke, his ears twitched, as if her voice was a tether. The bond forming between them felt almost tangible, a thread woven through the chaos of the previous day. Sheriff Holt approached, his boots crunching on the gravel. He held a small evidence bag, his face grim. "Lena, we found something by the canyon. Thought you'd want to see it." He opened the bag, revealing the locket Lena had spotted near Ellie. Its silver surface was scratched, the broken chain coiled like a snake. Inside was a faded photo of a young woman holding a toddler, Ellie, unmistakably, both smiling under a wide prairie sky. Lena's chest tightened. "Any ID on the woman?" "Not yet," Holt said. "But we traced the tire tracks to an abandoned truck 10 miles out. Registered to a guy named Carl Vinton, known poacher, been dodging us for years. Looks like he and his crew were hunting out here, probably for buffalo horns. Found shell casings matching the wounds on your bull." "Thunderheart," Lena corrected softly, her eyes flicking to the buffalo. "He fought them off, didn't he?" Holt nodded, his jaw tight. "Looks like it. Found blood, not all his, near the tracks. My guess. He charged them, gave them a scare. But the kid, that's the part one can't figure. Why's she out here? And why's he protecting her?" Lena's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The poachers, the locket, Ellie's torn clothes. She crouched by Thunderheart's enclosure, her hand hovering near the fence. "You saw something, didn't you?" she murmured. "You knew she needed you." Thunderheart's head lifted slightly, his deep eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, the prairie seemed to still, as if the land itself was listening. Maria joined them, her tablet glowing with notes. "I sent samples from Thunderheart to the lab. His genetic profile's unique, part of a rare lineage tied to the original Plains buffalo. If we're right, he's not just a survivor, he's a key to preserving the species. Researchers are already buzzing about his behavior. Guarding a human child? That's unheard of." Lena's breath caught. Thunderheart wasn't just a buffalo, he was a living bridge to the past, a symbol of the resilience her Blackfeet ancestors had revered. Her grandfather's stories echoed in her mind, tales of buffalo as kin, their spirits tied to the land and its people. She'd always respected those stories, but now, watching Thunderheart's steady gaze, she felt them in her bones. Holt's radio crackled, and he stepped away to answer it. Lena turned to Maria. "What's next for him?" "Sanctuary's setting up a permanent space," Maria said. "He'll need weeks to heal fully, but he's strong. The calf's doing well too, reunited with the herd soon, I hope." "But Lena, this story's getting bigger. Reporters showed up at the hospital this morning, asking about the hero buffalo. If they get wind of his genetics, it's gonna blow up." Lena frowned, her hand tightening around her coffee cup. She'd seen what media attention could do, turn a sacred moment into a circus. But Thunderheart's story deserved to be told, not for fame, but for what it could teach. His actions challenged everything science claimed about buffalo, about animals. If his behavior could spark new research or protections, she had to make sure it was done right. Holt returned, his expression darker. "Got a hit on the locket. The woman in the photo, likely Ellie's mother, Sarah Vinton. Carl's sister. She's been missing for 2 days, last seen near the reservation border. Locals say she was running from something. Maybe Carl, maybe worse. Ellie was with her." Lena's stomach dropped. So Ellie wasn't abandoned. Something happened out here. Something the poachers were part of. "Looks like it," Holt said. "We're searching for Sarah now. But Lena, that buffalo, he didn't just stumble across Ellie. He chose to stay with her. I've seen a lot out here, but that's something else." Lena glanced at Thunderheart, his coat catching the sunlight, the stitches stark against his fur. His strength was returning, but so was his majesty, the way his massive shoulders filled the enclosure, the way his horns curved like a crown. She thought of her grandfather's words, "The buffalo carries the heart of the prairie. When it speaks, you listen." Thunderheart had spoken, not with words but with actions, and now the world was starting to hear. She stepped closer to the enclosure, her voice low. "You're gonna be okay, Thunderheart. And we're gonna find her, Ellie's mom. I promise." His ears flicked, and he let out a soft huff, his breath warm in the cool morning air. It was as if he understood, as if the bond they'd forged in the storm was growing stronger. Maria touched Lena's shoulder. "We need to prep him for transport tomorrow. And you need rest. You've been running on adrenaline since yesterday." Lena shook her head. "Not yet. I need to know what happened out here. For Ellie. For him." She gestured to the locket, now in Holt's evidence bag. "That's our next clue. If Sarah's out there, we need to find her before the poachers do." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the prairie, a news van pulled up in the distance, its crew spilling out with cameras. Lena's jaw tightened. Thunderheart's story was spreading, and with it, the weight of responsibility. She had to protect him, not just from his wounds but from the world that would try to claim him. And somewhere out there, a mother was missing, her fate tied to the buffalo who'd risked everything to save her child. The prairie hummed with possibility, and Lena felt it in her chest, a call to keep going, to uncover the truth, to honor the bond she'd forged with a creature who'd changed everything she thought she knew. The Montana prairie glowed under a late afternoon sun, its golden light casting long shadows across the rolling hills. The air was warm, carrying the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers and the faint musk of buffalo herds grazing in the distance. At the edge of the newly established White Feather Sanctuary, a sprawling preserve named in honor of Lena's Blackfeet heritage, Thunderheart stood tall, his massive frame a testament to resilience. His chestnut coat, once matted with blood, now shone with a healthy luster, the stitches from his wounds barely visible beneath his thick fur. His curved horns caught the sunlight, and his deep, steady breaths filled the air with a quiet power. Nearby, his calf, now strong and sprightly, gamboled in the grass, kicking up dust with playful bounds. Lena Whitefeather leaned against a wooden fence, her braids swaying gently in the breeze, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart. The past weeks had been a whirlwind, moving Thunderheart and his calf to the sanctuary, navigating the media frenzy, and advocating for their future. At 38, Lena had spent her life studying wildlife, but Thunderheart had rewritten her understanding of what animals could do, what they could mean. His act of guarding Ellie, a child lost to the wilderness, had sparked something in her, a purpose she hadn't known she'd been searching for. The sanctuary was a hard-won victory. Lena had fought bureaucratic red tape, skeptical officials, and even her own doubts to secure this land, a 500-acre haven where Thunderheart's herd could roam free, protected from poachers and development. The funding had come partly from public donations, sparked by Thunderheart's story, which had spread like wildfire after a viral news segment dubbed him the hero buffalo. Scientists, too, had taken notice, launching studies on buffalo cognition inspired by his unprecedented behavior. Lena had spent hours with researchers, describing how Thunderheart had trusted her, how his eyes had seemed to speak when words could not. "Lena, you're gonna wear that fence out if you keep leaning on it," Maria Santos teased, approaching with a clipboard. The veterinarian's face was brighter now, the exhaustion of that stormy night replaced by a quiet pride. "Thunderheart's latest checkup's clean. He's fully healed, and the calves thriving." "You did it." "We did it," Lena corrected, her voice soft but firm. She glanced at Thunderheart, who was grazing now, his massive head lowered to the grass. Every so often he'd lift his head, his dark eyes finding her across the field, and a warmth would spread through her chest. It wasn't just gratitude, it was connection, a bond forged in the chaos of that rain-soaked rescue. Maria followed her gaze. "He knows you, Lena. I've worked with animals my whole career, and I've never seen anything like it. The way he responds to your voice, your presence, it's like you're part of his herd." Lena smiled, a rare softness breaking through her usual stoicism. "Maybe I am." She'd spent countless hours at the sanctuary, talking to Thunderheart, checking his wounds, even singing old Blackfeet songs her grandfather had taught her. Each time, Thunderheart would huff softly, his ears twitching, as if the melodies soothed him. Her ancestors had revered the buffalo as kin, their spirits intertwined with the land. Lena had always honored that belief, but now, with Thunderheart, she felt it. The locket's mystery had been solved, though the truth was heavier than Lena had expected. Sheriff Holt's team had found Sarah Vinton, Ellie's mother, hiding in a remote cabin near the reservation border. She'd been fleeing her brother Carl, whose poaching operation had spiraled into something darker: extortion, threats, a desperate grab for power in the underbelly of the region's black market. Sarah had taken Ellie and run, but Carl's men had caught up with her in the prairie. In the chaos, Ellie had wandered off, and Sarah, injured and terrified, had hidden, believing her daughter was lost. Thunderheart had found Ellie, shielding her from the poachers who'd shot him in their pursuit. Sarah was now safe, reunited with Ellie in Billings, but the scars of that night lingered. Lena had visited them in the hospital, bringing a small buffalo figurine for Ellie. The girl, still pale but bright-eyed, had clutched it tightly, whispering, "Big Cow saved me." Sarah, tears streaming down her face, had gripped Lena's hand, unable to find words for her gratitude. That moment had cemented Lena's resolve. Thunderheart's story wasn't just about survival, it was about rewriting what humans and animals could mean to each other. The sanctuary wasn't just a home for Thunderheart, it was a beacon. Lena had worked with tribal leaders and conservationists to establish it as a model for buffalo preservation, blending Blackfeet traditions with modern science. The preserve's creation had spurred a broader movement, a statewide initiative to strengthen anti-poaching laws and fund rewilding efforts. Thunderheart's rare genetic lineage, confirmed by Maria's lab results, had made him an ambassador for his species, his image plastered on billboards and conservation campaigns. But to Lena, he was more than a symbol, he was a friend. As the sun dipped lower, casting the prairie in hues of amber and rose, Thunderheart ambled toward the fence. His massive hooves thudded softly, his breath a warm cloud in the cooling air. Lena stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "Hey, big guy," she said, her voice low and warm. Thunderheart stopped a few feet away, his head lowering until his snout nearly brushed her palm. He huffed, a gentle sound that vibrated through her, and she laughed softly, her fingers grazing his coarse fur. The touch was electric, a silent promise between them. "You changed me, you know that," she murmured. "I thought I knew everything about your kind. But you showed me what courage really looks like." Thunderheart's eyes, deep and unyielding, held hers, and for a moment, the world was just the two of them, the prairie stretching endless around them. Maria cleared her throat, breaking the spell. "There's a group from the university coming tomorrow. They want to study his behavior, maybe set up a long-term observation program. And the tribal council's planning a ceremony to honor him, something about naming him a spirit guardian." Lena nodded, her gaze still on Thunderheart. "Good. He deserves it. But we keep it respectful, no turning him into a zoo exhibit." "Agreed," Maria said. "This place, this story, it's bigger than us now. People are listening, Lena. They're starting to see buffalo differently because of him." Lena's thoughts drifted to her own transformation. Before Thunderheart, she'd been a scientist, driven by data and observation. But his trust, his sacrifice, had cracked something open in her, a deeper connection to the land, to her heritage, to the idea that compassion could bridge species. She'd spent years fighting for wildlife, but now she fought for something more, a world where stories like Thunderheart's could inspire change, where humans could learn from the creatures they'd nearly destroyed. As the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of fire, Lena watched Thunderheart gallop across the field, his powerful strides shaking the earth. The calf followed, a smaller shadow mirroring his strength. The sight filled her with a quiet joy, a sense of purpose she hadn't known she'd needed. She'd lost her way after her grandfather's death, burying herself in work to avoid the grief. But Thunderheart had brought her back, not just to the land but to herself. The sanctuary's gates opened behind her, and a small figure ran out. Ellie, her pink jacket bright against the dusk. Sarah followed, her face still gaunt but lit with gratitude. Ellie stopped at the fence, her eyes wide as she watched Thunderheart. "Big Cow," she squealed, clutching the buffalo figurine Lena had given her. Lena knelt beside her, smiling. "His name's Thunderheart. He's pretty special, isn't he?" Ellie nodded, her tiny hand reaching toward the fence. Thunderheart paused, his head turning toward them, and for a moment, Lena swore he recognized the girl. He let out a soft bellow, deep and resonant, echoing across the prairie like a song. Ellie giggled, and Sarah wiped her eyes, whispering, "Thank you." As the stars began to emerge, Lena stood, her heart full. Thunderheart's story had saved more than just Ellie and the calf. It had sparked a movement, a shift in how people saw the buffalo, the land, and their own capacity for compassion. But there was still work to do, still truths to uncover, still a legacy to build. And Lena was ready to carry it forward, with Thunderheart by her side. The Montana prairie stretched boundless under a twilight sky, its expanse painted in hues of indigo and gold. The air was cool, scented with the sweet tang of wild grass and the faint musk of the buffalo herd grazing in the distance. At the heart of the White Feather Sanctuary, Thunderheart stood as a majestic silhouette, his massive frame outlined against the setting sun. His chestnut coat gleamed, the scars from his wounds now faint lines beneath his thick fur, a testament to his survival. His curved horns caught the last rays of light, and his deep, resonant bellow echoed across the hills, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the land itself. Nearby, his calf, now strong and bold, trotted beside him, a living promise of the future. Lena Whitefeather stood at the edge of the sanctuary, her boots planted firmly in the earth, her braids swaying gently in the evening breeze. At 38, she carried a quiet strength, her face etched with the lines of someone who'd faced storms, both literal and otherwise, and emerged whole. Beside her, a simple wooden plaque bore Thunderheart's name, carved in Blackfeet script alongside English, Thunderheart, guardian of the prairie, spirit of resilience. The plaque marked the sanctuary's dedication, a ceremony held weeks ago by the Blackfeet Tribal Council, where elders had sung songs of the buffalo's sacred bond with the land. Lena's heart swelled at the memory, at the way Thunderheart had stood tall as the drums echoed, as if he understood his place in their story. The sanctuary had grown beyond Lena's wildest hopes. Spanning 500 acres, it was now a thriving haven for buffalo, a place where Thunderheart's herd could roam free, protected by new state laws born from his story. His act of guarding Ellie, the lost child, had sparked a movement, new anti-poaching patrols, stricter penalties, and a national campaign to restore buffalo to their ancestral lands. Researchers from across the country visited regularly, studying Thunderheart's rare genetic lineage and his unprecedented behavior. Articles in scientific journals cited him as evidence of buffalo cognition, challenging old assumptions about animal intelligence. Lena had become their reluctant spokesperson, her voice steady as she spoke of Thunderheart's compassion, his trust, his sacrifice. She turned to see Ellie and Sarah approaching, their figures small against the vast prairie. Ellie, now 4, clutched her buffalo figurine, her dark eyes bright with wonder as she spotted Thunderheart. Sarah's face, once gaunt with fear, was softer now, though the weight of her ordeal lingered. They'd moved to a nearby town, rebuilding their lives with the support of the community drawn together by Thunderheart's story. Lena smiled as Ellie ran to her, wrapping her small arms around Lena's legs. "Big cow!" Ellie exclaimed, pointing at Thunderheart. He lifted his head, his ears twitching at her voice, and let out a soft huff, as if in greeting. Lena knelt beside the girl, her hand resting on her shoulder. "He's Thunderheart, remember?" Lena said, her voice warm. "He's watching over us all." Sarah joined them, her eyes glistening. "I still can't believe he saved her," she whispered. "Every time I see him, I don't know how to thank him. Or you." "You don't have to," Lena said, meeting her gaze. "He chose to protect her. And we're all part of his story now." The truth of that night had come to light in fragments, each piece a thread in a tapestry of courage and loss. Sarah had been fleeing her brother Carl's poaching ring, which had spiraled into violence and greed. When his men pursued her into the prairie, Thunderheart had charged, scattering them and taking bullets meant for Sarah and Ellie. Ellie had wandered off in the chaos, and Thunderheart, wounded and bleeding, had found her, standing guard until Lena arrived. Carl was now in custody, his operation dismantled, but the scars he'd left, on Sarah, on Ellie, on Thunderheart, were a reminder of the cost of greed and the power of compassion to heal it. Lena's own transformation ran deeper than she could articulate. Thunderheart had awakened something in her, a reconnection to her Blackfeet roots, a renewed sense of purpose. She'd once buried her grief for her grandfather in her work, keeping the world at arm's length. But Thunderheart's trust, his unyielding stand in the storm, had cracked her open. She'd found herself singing his songs again, speaking his stories, and advocating for the buffalo with a fire she hadn't known she possessed. The sanctuary wasn't just a refuge for Thunderheart, it was her homecoming, a place where she could honor her ancestors and the land they'd loved. As the stars began to speckle the sky, Lena walked toward Thunderheart, her steps slow and deliberate. He turned to her, his massive head lowering, his dark eyes locking with hers. She reached out, her fingers brushing his warm, coarse fur, and he leaned into her touch, a gentle nudge that felt like a promise. The moment was quiet, sacred, a bond forged in blood and rain now sealed in peace. "You taught me something, big guy," Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed me that love doesn't stop at species, that courage can change the world. I'll carry that with me, always." Thunderheart huffed, his breath a warm cloud, and for a moment, the prairie seemed to hum with his presence, as if the land itself was speaking through him. Lena thought of her grandfather's words, "The buffalo is the heart of the earth. When it thrives, we all thrive." Thunderheart had proven that, not just for her but for a world now watching, listening, learning. She turned to Ellie and Sarah, then to the horizon, where the herd moved like a living tide, their hooves a soft drumbeat against the earth. To you, reading this, she wanted to say, look at what one buffalo did. Look at what compassion can do. Thunderheart's story isn't just his, it's a call to see the world differently, to recognize the intelligence and heart in the creatures we share this earth with. Have you ever witnessed an animal's act of courage? A moment that changed how you see the wild? If you have, hold it close. If you haven't, seek it out. Support the sanctuaries, the laws, the voices fighting to protect what's left of our wilderness. Share Thunderheart's story, not for fame, but to remind us all that connection, between human, animal, and land, is our greatest strength. As the last light faded, Lena touched Thunderheart's flank one final time, her hand lingering on his warmth. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying into the night. He bellowed softly, a sound that rolled across the prairie, echoing in her soul. The stars burned bright above, and Lena knew this was no ending, just a beginning, a legacy that would endure as long as the buffalo roamed.